Thank you, everyone. We're very honoured today to have an international bonus, even though today is about Australian founders helping other founders. We're very honoured to have Renaud, who is a co-founder of Eventbrite. So everyone, welcome Renaud. Thank you. I think, and as Rick said, load up Slido and then hashtag the sunrise, ask your questions. I'll kick off the conversation, but I'm sure the more interesting questions will come from you, the audience. So I think to start off, why don't you describe how you came to meet Julia and Kevin and be involved in Eventbrite and a little bit about before co-founding Eventbrite and some of the things that you had done previously.
Sure. I actually met Kevin and Julia through a common friend. Kevin had the idea of connecting PayPal with event organizers to create tools that can send ticket sales directly to the event organizer's account. So that was the entire premise for Eventbrite at the time, that if we could get the money very quickly to the organizers, it would help them organize their events, and it would provide them with a suite of tools that they could use that they didn't have access to before. I mean, when we started, the state-of-the-art for promoting an event was putting a flyer on the wall, email, sending paper invitations. That still was happening at the time. So very non-technological ways of putting up an event and selling tickets for it. So we thought there was a unique opportunity to bring technology to this market. We didn't quite know how big the market was going to be. We had an inkling that it was probably a very big market, but no one had managed to quantify what we call the long tail of events, the small, medium-sized events, a bit like this one. There's hundreds of millions probably throughout the year all over the world. But it's a very hard to quantify market. But we were pretty excited about the opportunity. It was also a very good time because no one had thought of this idea before. There were event management tools, but they were mostly catering to the very large organizations, the stadiums, the sporting events, the large concerts, not so much for the smaller event organizers. So we met through this common friend and started working together in 2006. Do you have the clicker or someone else has it? Yes. I wanted to show you a few different versions of our platform to show you a bit of the journey that we've been on. It was very basic at the beginning, and I think a lot of it will resonate with a lot of you if you are building your own company, that sometimes you don't need all the bells and whistles that you can get with a larger team, that launching an MVP with core functionality that answers the needs of the market is much better than trying to build the perfect platform and wait until it's perfect to launch it. So if we can get the slides at some point, would be great.
Even go a little bit deeper into that MVP as to what was the core functionality in the beginning, and then also how did you go about building it? Obviously, the world is very different now with AWS and other cloud computing services. Describe 2006 and how dramatically different it was to today.
So we gave ourselves 2 years to figure out if we had a viable product, and we worked very quickly during these 2 years, but with a very tiny team. It was mostly the three of us. We had a couple of contractors here and there. So we built a very simple MVP that pretty much did only one thing, which was allow the event organizers to create a bunch of tickets and sell those tickets through the PayPal integration that we built. Very bare bones, web only. I mean, mobile wasn't a thing at the time, so that made our task easier. I think you have a much harder time today deciding which platform you should launch on. We had a very clear path towards creating those tools. It was the web. So we launched with a different brand. It was more like a code name. We started interacting with a lot of organizers in the Valley. People who organize tech events for the most part, starting to get quite a lot of feedback from them. and then iterated very quickly on the new features that people were asking for. We knew they had a need because they were still using the platform despite all the limitations that it had at the time. And we learned a lot through that process by talking to them, by going to events to see how everything was organized, understanding the difference between a free event and a paid event, and a small event and a medium-sized event. There's a lot of tiny differences that make building a product that fits all of the needs quite a challenge in the end. And now we're even handling a lot of large events, 50,000 person music festivals, large conferences. So that's another set of requirements that adds on to the needs of our users in the end. The process was very fast iterative. I was the only tech person on the team. The infrastructure was very small. We launched with one server that had everything on it: web database, web servers, well, server with a singular. And then we scaled as we needed to. As the business grew, we added another server, separated the database, added firewalls and load balancers, and slowly. In 2009, we had to make the move to the cloud. We quickly realized that the event space is a very bursty space, so there's a lot of events that sell very quickly. And even early on, we had some events that were much larger than we ever anticipated we would be doing at that time. One example I like to talk about is one salsa festival in Mexico. So we had no presence in Mexico, of course. We were all in San Francisco. And they brought 120,000 people to sign up through the platform, which was a big hit on our servers, as you can imagine. But it showed us that we had a quite high potential, that even those large events were really lacking tools that could help them sell tickets, and that they were using us. So we saw definitely that we were onto something then.
And talk a little bit more about those moments where you knew you had something, where you had the inkling that this would be a business. You didn't know how big it might be, but the sort of initial success metrics of folks that you had never spoken to in countries you'd never been to, signing up and running events. What were some of the things that, in your mind, sort of indicated that you had something?
Well, I think the first time we realized how global this could be is probably early 2009. I think we looked at 2008, and we saw that people had used us in 140 countries, I think, at the time. We really had no idea until we looked at the data. We knew that we had broad coverage, but 140 countries was a whole lot. And then when these big events started hitting us more regularly, we saw that people were pushing us upwards almost. We had very much targeted the small, maybe less than 1,000 people events, and regularly we got all these big conference organizers or these music festivals randomly using the platform to use it. One other example is when the University of Georgetown decided to invite President Obama to come speak. And they had the great idea of doing that on a lottery basis. So they put up a page on our site with the potential to win a ticket to see President Obama speak. And I think the entire town of Georgetown flooded our website and took us down in the end. So we felt the pain, but we also felt the excitement that people were actually thinking of us for all these ways of gathering people together. And I think that's what really strengthened our belief in the end and helped us raise money and helped us become what we are today.
And go back to 2006, 2007, what kind of volume of events or tickets did you have, and how did you think about whether you were making progress or not, or whether the progress was great enough that this could be a big scalable business? What were some of the early metrics?
Well, from day one, I think we had two metrics that we still look at today. So the first one is gross ticket sales, how much face value the tickets that we are selling adds up to. And then users for us are organizers who sell at least one ticket. So we've been looking at that number very closely to try to guess how fast the business is going to grow in the next year. And at the beginning, we were very unsophisticated, I think, in how we set our targets. We just set a big number increase for the next year and globally over the entire period. And we didn't quite meet our goals every year, but we were very, very close, and those were very high growth targets. So we were pretty comfortable with the growth we were seeing. Now we're a lot more sophisticated in the way we analyze the data and predict the future growth, and that helps us staff correctly, helps us decide where to go next. We launched internationally over the last 5 years, and that's been very exciting, but also very hard to pinpoint which places we should go to. Australia, for example, was a clear, easy decision. We were already doing 5% of our business in Australia before we opened our office here. We had 100 million Australian dollars worth of tickets sold on the platform when we opened the office here. So that's the type of decisions and metrics that are really helpful, getting everyone to rally behind the idea.
And was it hundreds of events being organized right from the get-go, or was there a slow period, or was there a discovery of how to bring on a number of different event organizers?
There were, I can remember, and it's been so long, we had a very quick jump, maybe in the hundreds at the beginning, and slowly over time, I can remember we probably had $100,000 worth of ticket sales every week at some point. And now it's, I don't know, probably every 2 minutes. So it's been accelerating very quickly.
And describe, obviously the company is based in Silicon Valley and has built itself through venture capital, how you thought through the financings of the company. Obviously in the early days, it's on a needs basis. Go sort of deeper into how you made decisions around financing, and then also, if you can recall, what were the reasons people said no to you in the beginning?
Good question. So we bootstrapped the company for 2 years. Kevin, my co-founder, invested some of his money to get us started, which was great to have some amount that we set to fund the company for these 2 years. At the end of 2008, we started thinking about fundraising actively to the outside world. We were starting to have a good story and some traction, some initial fairly convincing arguments. So we went out, I think, at the end of 2008 to raise a round. And we were rejected for the most part. We talked to a lot of VCs at the time. No one was, I think it was still too early, and we had high expectations for the company, and maybe that didn't really translate in the presentations we were making. So we were turned down, I think, not for the lack of quality of the team, not for the lack of growth, but for being very ambitious about what we could become and setting our expectations very high as to what kind of valuation we would need. So instead, we decided to do a bridge round for another year and wait until the end of 2009 to fundraise again. One thing we did very well was leaving our business plan with all the VCs we met at the end of 2008 and showing them what we were predicting we could make in 2009. And when we came back in 2009 to show the progress, they could actually see that we had met and even exceeded the plan that we had left them with. So that was a very convincing argument that we were the right team to execute on the plan, that we were the right, we had the right product also that fit with the market. A lot of the VCs we talked to actually did a lot of due diligence and called our organizers and figured out what the mood was about the brand. And that's when we managed to close Sequoia Capital as our first investor, which was a very strong signal that, and Sequoia doesn't invest in average companies. They always strive to be the top firm in the valley and invest only in the best companies available. So for us, it was really a benchmark in the growth of the company, getting a very well-known fund to invest in yourself, I think. that's proof that you've somehow made it to a certain stage. Doesn't predict the outcome in the end, but it's a strong signal also to the rest of the investing community, and I think that helped us down the line close additional rounds. We raised $200 million in total over 6 or 7 rounds now.
Let's go back to the round that Kevin personally invested in, and outside of the 3 co-founders, who did you sort of hire after that, and what kind of if-then decisions around hiring did you make at the time? If you got to $100,000 in sales a week, then you felt confident to hire. What were sort of those decisions that you made in building the first 10 people, and then who were the first 10 people?
So the first couple of hires were engineers. I had so much bandwidth during the day to code, so we found a few young, promising folks who stayed with us for not very long in the end. I think there's quite different needs, and we were very frugal at the time because we know we had a very limited budget, so we found people who fit that bill at the time. And then we hired for our weaknesses. We were strong in engineering, financing, support, some marketing, but not great. So the first couple of hires were VP of product, director of marketing, director of partnerships. And then we built each one, as we grew, was allowed to build their own team, starting to expand each area of development. We hired director of engineering as well to help me recruit, to help me build the team. So that's very organically. We had customer support also from day one. We knew that service was an issue for our clients, and we really wanted to have a 24/7 support line. It didn't happen until 2010, I think, when we had 24/7 coverage. But we knew it would be very important that the key, being able to talk to anyone at any time, would be critical in separating us from the rest of the pack, because that's an expensive value proposition. And if you can give that comfort to your clients, I think you're much better off and people see you in a different light.
Talk about the early customer acquisition. So you mentioned a bunch of technology events in the Bay Area, started the service. What were some of the, as you got past that manual behavior, what were some of the things that really contributed to the growth of the company? And how did that sort of work in a more detailed way?
Mm-hmm. So again, the times were different. SEO was all the rage to get discovered at the time. There was no social media, or very little. So we really focused on SEO first. And we also has this great product that has a built-in viral loop in it. Each time one organizer, like yourself for this conference, organizes an event like this one, there's 500 people who know about the platform. And the more regularly they use it, the next time they have an event, they'll think about Eventbrite first to help them organize their own events. So that viral loop, I think, was very critical at the beginning to first spread the word within the tech communities that there was better technology out there to help you organize events. And then geographically, as people went to the Valley to attend events, they would take back that there was a great platform that they could use for that. So it's all about also educating your customer base. Everywhere in the world, the tech community has been the first to adopt us because they know about the company, they read TechCrunch, they read all the tech journals, and they are aware. But there's still plenty of people who haven't heard of us, and that part continues for years and years after you launch your product. So the thinking that you can have instant success, I think instant success can happen in consumer-to-consumer type applications or social viral applications. But for e-commerce, it's much harder, and it takes a lot longer. So that's something, and maybe that one of the myths that you can build a very high growth company very quickly and sell it off for billions in 2 years, I think is one of the Silicon Valley myths that drives a lot of people around the world to want to create startups and might not be the right motivation for doing so.
So Last question, then I'll try to go to the audience Q&A. Talk about how dramatic the decision was to make it a freemium product, so free for people who didn't charge for attendance, and then the paid model would be tied to the percentage of the ticket sales. How dramatic a decision or not was that? And then how important do you think that was in removing any friction for this growth model?
So when we launched, and for the first 2 years, our product was completely free. Even if you had a paid events, you would connect it with your PayPal account, you would pay the PayPal fees, but our part of the service was entirely free. This was a very conscious decision. We wanted to see how fast we could grow without the hindrance of having to pay for the product. And then by the way, that's when we launched. Looks very, you can tell we had a great designer on the team. That was me. There's other slides, I don't know if you've seen them, but no. So at some point we knew we had to find a business model. And for us, it would have to be a business model that's very aligned to the interest of our clients. So we thought the simplest thing to do was to charge a commission on paid ticket sales. And that's what we went for. So at some point, I think at the end of 2008, we introduced our paid service and slowly reduced the functionality that free users had. They could still organize paid events and not be charged, but there were some limitations in the product, so limitations on the ticket price, on the number of tickets you could have, on how many invitations you could send. And that lasted about a few months, maybe 3-4 months, where we at some point said we really need to have it was too complicated to manage and to keep track of who had access to what and what time they signed up and which features they were allowed to use. So we didn't see any backlash introducing the paid service first. So we thought we had a good feeling that people wouldn't complain too much and that they wouldn't lose too many clients, because there still were not that many other platforms to choose from at the time. So at some point, we introduced the paid service as the only option to sell paid tickets. A lot of apprehension before, how many people are we going to lose? And it was at the same time as the global financial crisis was starting to happen. So there were a lot of uncertainty in the business, which also might explain why we weren't able to raise money, because 2008 was probably close to the time where Sequoia sent the famous memo to all their portfolio companies about being very frugal and not expecting any new money for a while. So yeah, at some point you have to make a jump and really believe that people are seeing the value in your product that will justify for them to be able to pay for it.
Sure. So the first question, which is what is the Wi-Fi password, is actually embarrassingly, the venue is beautiful, but they don't have Wi-Fi, so it has to be mobile data. The second is any surprising growth hacks. So you talked a little bit about the discovery model of people attending events and then organizing after experiencing the product. Any surprising growth hacks, and maybe even go deeper on the SEO, what kind of keywords converted the best and drove some of the initial customer acquisition?
I don't think we had any secret growth hacks. We experimented a lot. We tried to think how to organize the data that we had in a way that was publicly exposed so that all the search engines could index most of the content that we had. We see ourselves as owning this content, which is very valuable, knowing what's happening in a city. We integrated with a lot of event discovery platforms over the years. So as soon as we launched our API, the first partners we signed up were event discovery platforms that would gather all the event information for locale or for entire countries. There's a bunch that still exist. So finding the right partners, I think, helped us also a lot. When your marketing budget is very limited, you find creative ways to make deals with people who are aligned in the same interests and who can refer you new customers. I think a very undervalued asset is word of mouth. If you provide a great service, those people talk to each other. They're in the same business and they network all the time. So if you provide a value proposition that they like, if you provide a service that is always up and provide great customer service on top of that, people will talk about your product. And we actually have, especially at the beginning, we had users helping users figure out how to do some of the things you could do on the platform without our intervention. So they would help each other decide how to use the product, which was pretty awesome.
And actually, word of mouth is a good one in that it is the magic behind so many great businesses, but is in many ways this unsatisfyingly immeasurable. Are there any ways you can, or tips that you can give to people as to how did you quantify word of mouth, or how did you try to measure at least parts of it?
Well, we couldn't at the time. I think social media changes that. Word of mouth now happens kind of online. It's still peer-to-peer. It's still based on trust, on who you know. But it's actually more quantifiable now. We get mentioned all the time, and there's a lot of what's the best tool to use this and that on Quora, on all these other platforms. So you can actually have some idea of the impact that your product has by measuring all of these data.
The question is that now you're big, how have you created defenses from being disrupted yourself? And then do you have any stories of you going head-to-head with smaller companies?
So yes, that's definitely something we think about every day. How do we not disrupt ourselves or get disrupted by someone else? And we're a technology company. We're not an events company. So we think about how to use technology to improve our tools constantly. We lived through two major changes in technology with social media and mobile. So we always tried to think the hardest we could how we could utilize these technologies to make the life of our users easier, faster, better. That's something you have to constantly do and iterate on as the platforms themselves change. So we invested a lot in technology, in hiring people who can make it happen for us. We also have hidden features like being able to support a big on-sale, events that sells within 5 or 10, sell out within 5 or 10 minutes, we can do that. Fraud and risk, something smaller companies don't necessarily think about. When you have your own payment processing, you'll get people trying to exploit the system. And from day one, when we launched our own payment processing, we knew that this was going to be a core feature that people would be willing to pay for, to have the peace of mind that there was competent people to deal with these problems in-house. So that's a very defensible competitive advantage that we've built over time and refined. 24/7 customer support, a smaller, less funded company will not be able to do that. And that's a key, I think, in this offline world, to have this human presence when you need it, to help you, to guide you, to tell you, to comfort you that you're actually in the right place with the right words. So we spend a lot of time hiring the best talent there and training them the right way so that they can convey what we want to tell our client base overall.
What was your core measure for success after 2 years? You spent a little bit of time on the gross ticket sales and the number of active event organizers. Any more to it than those key metrics? What was your definition of success?
No, I think we looked at these two metrics very obsessively every day and see where the business was coming from, getting excited about the potential internationally for the business, thinking about how after 2 years we were going to have some overall plan to take over the world. And we have very ambitious people, I think, in the end, and we want to be used everywhere. So that was already, I think, an idea in the making, even if we were not actively pursuing internationalization at the time. I think you realize fairly quickly if you have something or not, and that's part of the art of being a startupper. It's to be able to gauge what the momentum is behind the company, what are the potential next steps, and for the ones that fail, realizing that it's failing. I think that's something I see almost too often with founders being very obstinate about their ideas. So good that they have to keep doing at it for quite a while. So knowing when you have something good, but also knowing when you have something bad is pretty important for being an entrepreneur.
Actually, I might rewind to the previous question around yourself being disrupted. What are some of the things that you've chosen not to do? I think in defining your mission and what you're doing, it's almost as important to say out loud what you're not going to do. So what are some of the things that you could have done that you decided not to do?
Well, I think we've been very good staying focused on our core strength. A lot of startups want to do too many things too fast and get, in the end, distracted from their primary goal. So we had many adjacent opportunities that probably would make a lot of sense, like fundraising, like membership management, all the things that our clients have to do. But we really decided to focus on the registration and ticketing part. We thought this could still be improved by a lot, being applied to mobile. So there were a lot of challenges that we still have unresolved that didn't give us enough bandwidth to try to attack new segments where there are already established players, where you would go against large companies in that space. So instead, I think we decided to stay on course and really focus and double down on what we were good at.
How did you think about competition in the early days, and how much or how little attention did you pay to it?
Well, we had very little competition at the beginning. There was one European company doing something similar, but overall, we were not looking at competitors at all. Now we're really not focused on competition either. We're trying to bring innovation to this industry. And if you look at competitors, you're going to have almost the desire to copy some of the things that they do instead of trying to find completely new ways to handle difficult problems that you need to solve. One example is what we did with reserved seating, for example. A venue like this, perfect with numbered seats. We wanted to create the first self-service platform allowing organizers to design their own seating arrangement. So instead of doing what everybody did, which is loading an XML file created by some tech guy into the backend, requiring an account manager to upload the different prices for all the different configurations, we decided to make that a self-service product. So if you go on the platform today, you can recreate this entire venue and start selling tickets for it within a few minutes. It's really easy to use, drag and drop, very in line with the previous products that we had. That's why sometimes looking at the competition prevents you from making the big jump to a big breakthrough in the technology that you give to your potential customers.
Did you, or when did you start advertising?
We did not advertise for the first couple of years. After we started hiring after we hired our director of marketing, we spent a little money on SEM, a very low budget, and now we have much bigger budgets as we were able to raise money and get traction and get revenue as well, which is very important to fuel marketing.
If you were to start again in that sort of platform decision, how would you think about launching on the web or mobile, and how would you think about that fresh if you started today?
Well, what we said that mobile has taken over the world. The truth is, for our event organizers, the platform is still too complex to manage for large events to use a mobile phone. There's a lot of settings. You can have 10,000 people in your attendee list that you need to navigate through. So I think there are specific usage that are better matched with certain devices. And while we made our entire site responsive and usable on all the devices, we see that the web is still very by a large margin, the preferred tool for our event organizers. On the other side, people buying tickets, we see great growth in mobile adoption. So look forward to many improvements in that space for us. So it really depends on your product. I think they can be very complementary, all these devices. So as an event organizer, I think I'd love to be able to check my stats on the go, do very simple things in an app, but not expect to be able to browse 50,000 records on my phone, because that doesn't make any sense. So be very smart about what you put on the web versus mobile versus APIs. There's a place for everything.
Sure. How did you balance trying to push things hard to grow fast with the reality of cash flow in the beginning, particularly?
Well, we've been very frugal since day one. Even if we raised 200 million, we still have the largest part of that in the bank. So we've been very careful, very thoughtful about who we hired, how we hired, where we hired. We haven't expanded all over the world yet. We have 8 offices in different countries, but I think you have to realize it might be your last round ever. If you go with that in mind, I think you're much more thoughtful about how you spend it. If you think that you're going to get 50 million again and again and again and again, I think you're probably mistaken, because at some point it's going to stop. And so try to do the most with what you have. Don't be aggressive on the growth side, but also smart about how you manage cash flow, because too many good startups fail because they run out of cash. And I think one good lesson that we had over the years is to fundraise when you don't really need the cash. It's much easier to convince people when you're not in a dire situation of running out of cash in 3 months than if you tell them you have 20 million in the bank and you still want to get more cash to be more aggressive, but that it's not critical to your success.
What are your thoughts on startup ecosystems outside of San Francisco? So obviously you live in France the majority of the time now. You've experienced different ecosystems around the world. What are your sort of thoughts at a high level as to the magic of Silicon Valley, and then also the things that are not so good about it?
Well, yeah, in Europe I see a lot of growth. I mean, all the places I've been involved in, London, Paris, Berlin, the startup ecosystems there has just exploded over the last few years. There's a lot more money available for startups. There's tons of accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces. I think you're seeing the same trend here. It's actually pretty global. I went to, a friend of mine went to a bunch of smaller countries, Egypt, Turkey. All these places are also super excited about technology in general, and their local ecosystems are growing very fast as well. So I think we're seeing an overall global enthusiasm for what the future can bring, and what part we as individuals living not in Silicon Valley can bring to that table. Investors are also more, I think, risk-prone, going outside of their usual boundaries. You see a lot more VCs, even from the Valley, starting to open offices in China, in India, in Europe, in Sweden. So there's a lot of competition everywhere, but also a lot of positive, encouraging trends everywhere we go. The difficulty, I think, is wanting to be the next Silicon Valley. I think Silicon Valley will still lead the way. They've built the ecosystem over 60, 70 years now. They have all the pieces that you need, universities bringing talent to the market with very ambitious individuals wanting to be entrepreneurs, that entrepreneurial culture that's really built into the American system. The financing world around that to fund every step of the way, with a lot of successful entrepreneurs being angels themselves, Series A, and all the big funds being present. The pension funds actually invest a lot of their money into entrepreneurs through the different VCs. So it's an entire ecosystem that exists, and even when you look for co-founders, and you don't necessarily need to look that far, you probably have a few coworkers who want to start companies too, because that's what everybody dreams about. So I think that environment is very special and very hard to replicate. But learning from that ecosystem and trying to slowly and very methodically improve regulations, improve the way you collaborate with universities, for example, all of this can bring your own ecosystem to the next level.
What does Silicon Valley do badly, in your opinion, or if anything?
Maybe managing the variations in overall activity in the space. So I've personally lived in the Valley through 2 different recession cycles, the big crash in 2000, 2001, the recession in 2008, 2009, and each time the balance swings completely the opposite way in the Valley. So all the rents come down when recession hits, or there's no funding anymore, there's no IPOs, people leave. So it's pretty dramatic when you're there. And it was especially dramatic in 2000 because there was so much hype built in, and people from all over the world had come to work for these startups. And from one day to the next, all the H-1B visas were no longer valid, and people had to leave within 3 months. And it was pretty impressive how fast an entire city can turn around. And now you're seeing the other side where there's been major exits, everything's going well, people are hiring like crazy, and property values are going up, rents are outrageous now. So it's pretty impressive and quite fascinating to watch.
Actually, how has the Eventbrite team been built out around the world? So obviously starting in San Francisco, but then how quickly did you open up other offices, and what types of functions do you think can exist, geographically anywhere? And how's Eventbrite thought about it?
So we opened our first international office in London in 2011. London was already our third biggest city in terms of ticket sales, so it was very natural for us to be there, very friendly, very similar in terms of mentality and banking system and e-commerce practices to the US, so it was almost a no-brainer for us to have a presence there. And then now we're on 4 continents, but we've done it very methodically, going after one country after another. We opened in Ireland last year, I think. We also purchased a company in South America, very similar to us, that had offices in Sao Paulo and Mendoza in Argentina. So we grew through acquisitions as well. But we try to really approach each market as a separate entity now, thinking, do we have the right product for this market, building the things that we need for the local markets, being very careful about translations, being business rules in general, employment laws, all the things that make e-commerce a bit more tricky to scale. And we've opened in Australia about a year ago now. Hopefully we'll be in many more places, but we are still a very frugal company, so we try to be very sensitive about how we spend our money.
And in terms of, that's obviously being closer to your customers and being closer to the unique needs of each local market. Chatting last night, where you've opened up an office in Nashville, Tennessee, originally for support, but now some product as well. How have you thought about those types of office openings?
Yeah, so the first offices we had were purely biz dev and marketing. Once we purchased the company in South America, they had an engineering team in place that we kept because they were very strong engineers, especially on the payment side. They had done many integrations with payment providers, so we really leveraged that and started hiring a lot there. And then when customer service decided to move their center to Nashville, for many reasons, very attractive city to live in, a lot of universities around, very talented workforce. And they had a lot of talented engineers also, so we decided why not try to hire there. I think that experience, having a team in South America, becoming comfortable doing work remotely with remote teams allowed us to take a chance and start hiring in Nashville as well for engineers. But for the longest time, everybody was in the same room. All the engineers, all the product team were in the same office. And that was a strength, but also a weakness in the end, because we couldn't attract talent from elsewhere. We had limited ourselves to a pool of people who were, first of all, very expensive, very talented for the most part, but also in a very competitive environment where people don't necessarily stay for too long in companies in general. So having those other offices made us realize we can hire very talented people who will be very faithful to the company at a lower cost without loss of productivity or anything really, because they bring a lot to the team now.
Lovely. And I think for the last question, what's next for Eventbrite?
Well, I think we're at the beginning. Like, it's been 9.5 years, but we still have a lot to offer, a lot to develop, a lot of new products that we're thinking about to be even more part of the event organizing space than we are. And we still have a lot of countries to take develop the product layer, conquer. We want to be a global marketplace. I think there's marketplace that we are starting to very focus on. How do we build the mechanisms for people to know that an event is a quality event, that it's going to attract a specific type of individuals? How do we promote that to you? How do we become the de facto app that you use on your mobile when you think about what you're going to do this weekend or next week or when you travel to London? So we want to be that very ubiquitous platform that people really associate with event. We want to be the only one. So there's a lot to build towards that. And to be global, we'll have a lot more offices to open, a lot more products to adapt to the local markets. So there's plenty of upside for us, and I'm very excited to still be part of the company and pushing every day to make it happen.
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Renaud.